It's 3:22 in the afternoon, local time, somewhere over the Arabian Sea. An Iranian drone, slow, buzzing, state television footage already rolling back in Tehran, is closing on the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. 20 million barrels of oil per day flow through that narrow choke point behind it. 40,000 US troops are positioned within striking distance of the Islamic Republic, and an F-35C pilot, sitting in a $100 million jet armed with an AIM-120D missile that costs more than most people's houses, is watching this drone on his screen like it's a gnat headed toward a lawnmower. In about 11 seconds, that Iranian drone becomes a debris field in the Arabian Sea. Today, folks, we're not just talking about a drone shootdown. We're talking about one of the most strategically loaded military standoffs the world has seen since the Cold War. In the last 72 hours, the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group has been prowling the Arabian Sea within striking range of Iran. The USS Gerald R. Ford is steaming hard to join it. Over 50 US fighter jets, F-22 Raptors, F-35s, F-16s, have repositioned across the Middle East in under 24 hours. And Iran responded by shutting down sections of the Strait of Hormuz during live-fire naval drills, while its supreme leader publicly threatened to sink an American aircraft carrier. Meanwhile, diplomats were sitting in hotel rooms in Geneva, having perfectly polite conversations about uranium enrichment. This is not a Twitter spat. This is two military powers having a very expensive staring contest, with real missiles at the table. Let's break this down the way it actually happened, because the way it played out this week is a masterclass in how modern military coercion actually works, and why one wrong move here doesn't just start a war, it potentially breaks the global economy. Here's where things get interesting, folks. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, launches what Tehran will later call a routine and lawful surveillance drone into international airspace near the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group. Now, in the IRGC's version of this story, this drone is on a perfectly innocent photography mission. Data transmitted successfully. Mission accomplished. Nothing to see here. In the US Navy's version, an armed drone is closing on a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier without communicating, without responding to warnings, in a threat zone that US Central Command has already publicly defined. The F-35C pilot has rules of engagement. The pilot has a trigger. The AIM-120D Advanced Medium-Range Air-to-Air Missile, AMRAAM to the armchair generals watching, hits Mach 4 almost immediately after launch. It doesn't chase the drone. It calculates exactly where the drone is going to be and meets it there. The intercept happens in seconds. By the time Iranian state media starts crafting its response, the drone is already parts on the surface of the Arabian Sea. This is the part that the Iranian military community, and a lot of Western analysts, missed in the headlines. This wasn't a defensive reaction. This was a message, and an extraordinarily specific one. You want to know what that message was? We see everything you're doing. We know exactly what you're flying, and our pilots are sitting in ready rooms 3 seconds from putting any of it in the water. Now let's back up, because to understand what's happening at sea, you need to understand what makes the Strait of Hormuz the single most valuable piece of ocean on Earth. 35 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, about the same distance as the English Channel, except instead of ferries and fishing boats, you're routing roughly 20 million barrels of crude oil through it every single day. That's about 1/5 of the world's daily petroleum consumption, moving through a choke point barely wider than the Washington, D.C. Beltway. Saudi Arabia's oil exports go through it. Qatar's liquefied natural gas exports go through it. The UAE's entire energy trade goes through it. And here's the part people keep forgetting. 84% of that oil is headed to Asia, not to the US or Europe. China alone consumes around 5 million barrels per day, transiting Hormuz. So when Iran says it can close the strait, it's not threatening America's morning commute. It's threatening Beijing's industrial economy. That's a threat with a very strange geometry. Iran knows this. The US knows this. China definitely knows this. So when the IRGC announces its smart control of the Strait of Hormuz exercise, and starts launching anti-ship cruise missiles into live-fire test zones directly overlapping the inbound shipping lane, that's not a random military drill. That's a very calculated demonstration. Look what we can reach. Look how close we are to the thing that runs the global economy. Think very carefully before you point those carrier strike groups at our nuclear facilities. Think of it like a neighbor who walks outside with a baseball bat, stands next to your brand new car, and says he's just practicing his swing. Technically legal, definitively threatening. 5:47 a.m. Somewhere in the strait, on the same day, things get even messier. IRGC fast boats, and when I say fast boats, I mean the kind of small, maneuverable, swarming patrol craft that have been a fixture of Iranian asymmetric naval doctrine since the 1980s, approach a US-flagged, US-crewed merchant vessel transiting the strait. They don't fire. They don't need to. They board it. They circle it. They make their point. US Central Command responds. American warships intervene to escort the vessel out. Now, think about the choreography here, folks. On the same day, Iran shoots a drone at the carrier group's airspace, shuts down sections of the strait for anti-ship missile tests, and harasses a US-flagged commercial ship on the surface. And simultaneously, their diplomats are sitting in Geneva, across a table from American envoys, discussing a potential nuclear deal. That is not chaos. That is a pressure campaign running on multiple tracks at the same time. The message to Washington is essentially, you need this deal as much as we do, and while we're talking, we're going to keep demonstrating what happens if you don't. The carrier math. Let's talk about what the US actually has in the water right now, because this is where it gets genuinely staggering. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group has been operating in the Arabian Sea since January 26th. A nuclear-powered aircraft carrier with roughly 70-plus aircraft aboard, 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, an attack submarine running silent underneath all of it, and enough Tomahawk cruise missiles across those destroyers and the submarine to service a very long target list. Each Tomahawk carries a 1,000-pound conventional warhead and has a range of around 1,000 miles. The strike group doesn't need to get close to Iran to reach Tehran. It's already there. The USS Gerald R. Ford is on the way. When that arrives, folks, the US will have 2 of the most powerful warships on Earth operating in one of the smallest strategic bodies of water on Earth. That's not subtlety. That is a country putting its most expensive chess pieces on the board and saying, look at what we're holding. And then there's the air campaign being assembled around it. F-22 Raptors, the 5th-generation air superiority king, $143 million per airframe, repositioning from Langley to RAF Lakenheath. F-35 is flowing from Aviano, Spangdahlem, and McIntyre. F-16s, 12 from Germany, 12 from Italy, 12 from South Carolina. Over 50 jets repositioned in 24 hours. The last time the US assembled an Air Force presence this large in the Middle East was 2003, the opening night of the Iraq War. These aren't defensive assets parked on a runway. This is strike architecture being assembled piece by piece. Here's the genius part of this strategy. Iran's air defense network is real, but it has known holes. Their ballistic missile stockpile was significantly degraded during the Israel-Iran conflict last year. Analysts estimated Israel destroyed 35 to 45% of it. They've reportedly reconstituted the medium-range missiles, but the strategic picture is fundamentally different than it was a year ago. The US knows where every IRGC Navy warship is, every submarine shelter, every missile launcher. Satellite reconnaissance means there's no hiding in a conflict that starts at sea. The IRGC fleet, 12 warships, around 20 fast attack boats, 19 submarines, would face a US Navy that, as one defense analyst put it this week, could send the IRGC Navy to the bottom fairly efficiently. But here's the kicker. Iran's actual deterrent is not the symmetrical fight. It never was. It's the asymmetric chaos of what happens after. The Houthi precedent in the Red Sea already showed the world how a relatively small armed group can functionally close a major shipping corridor. Now imagine that playbook, but with a full state military, mines in the strait, swarming drones across the Gulf, and missile salvos at U.S. bases in Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Jordan. That's the scenario keeping every admiral and diplomat up at night. The ROI problem is... Think about the economics here for a second, folks. The U.S. has committed 2 carrier strike groups, 50-plus advanced aircraft, THAAD and Patriot batteries repositioned across 6 countries, somewhere between 30,000 and 40,000 U.S. troops in the broader region. The daily operational cost of running a carrier strike group is estimated between $6 million and $10 million, depending on tempo. You're looking at tens of millions of dollars a day just to park these assets in a threatening posture. Iran's response? Anti-ship missile drills that cost maybe a few $100,000 in ordnance. A drone that went for maybe $20,000 or $30,000. Fast boats that run on diesel. The entire exercise they conducted in the Strait was, in terms of raw dollars spent, a fraction of 1% of what the U.S. burned in fuel repositioning its assets. This is the core frustration of American military strategy against Iran for the last 3 decades. The United States brings overwhelmingly superior hardware. Iran brings overwhelmingly cheaper disruption. The math never evens out the way the hardware suggests it should. 6 p.m., Geneva. While all of this is unfolding in the Arabian Sea, 2 delegations in Geneva are apparently having productive conversations. That word, productive, got used a lot this week by people who would know, but the details were kept thin. What's confirmed is that Iran agreed to meet again. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said the Iranians had agreed to certain guiding principles, but weren't yet addressing specific red lines. Progress, apparently, of a kind. And this is where you have to appreciate the sheer audacity of what Iran pulled off this week. They shot down, or rather had shot down, a drone near the American carrier. They shut the world's most important oil choke point. They boarded a U.S.-flagged ship. They had their supreme leader publicly threaten to sink a carrier. And they still walked out of Geneva with an agreement to keep talking. That's not weakness. That's a negotiating team that fully understands the gap between American military capability and American political will to use it. Because the U.S. administration, according to multiple sources with knowledge of the situation, doesn't actually have a clear plan for what comes after an attack on Iran. Who fills the vacuum? The IRGC is the most organized faction. A strike that removes the regime could hand power directly to the people running the missile program. Nobody in Washington has a satisfying answer to that question, and Tehran knows it. Here's what you should be watching in the next 72 hours, because this story is not over. The USS Gerald R. Ford arrival is the next major escalation marker. When 2 full carrier strike groups are operating simultaneously in the Arabian Sea, the military posture shifts from pressure campaign to something that looks a lot more like pre-strike positioning. Iran's leadership will have to decide how to respond to that arrival without triggering the very attack they're trying to deter. The nuclear talks are the release valve. If Iran makes a meaningful concession on enrichment or accepts inspection terms that give Washington a face-saving win, the carriers can quietly steam away, and everyone pretends this was all just very assertive diplomacy. The deal becomes the exit ramp. If those talks collapse, what you've watched play out this week, the drone shoot-down, the Hormuz closure, the fast boat harassment, the 50-jet repositioning, that becomes the opening chapter of something significantly larger. 1/5 of the world's daily oil, 2 nuclear-powered carriers, a 22-mile strait, the most expensive piece of water on Earth. And somewhere in Geneva, diplomats drinking bad coffee and deciding whether any of this ends with a handshake. The carriers reached the Arabian Sea. The question is whether they leave the same way they arrived. So here's what I want from you folks. You've watched this whole thing unfold this week, and I want the real armchair generals in the comments to weigh in. If Tehran walks away from Geneva with no deal next week, what does the first 48 hours of a U.S. strike on Iran actually look like? Does the F-35 lead? Does the B-2 Spirit come out of nowhere first? Or does the Tomahawk volley from the destroyers open the door before a single pilot rolls down a runway? Drop your tactical breakdown in the comments. Pin your best answer, and I'll feature it in the next video.